Hello, fellow wargamers and history buffs. The robot revolution has arrived, and they're coming for my job. Stay tuned. So, in a previous episode, I had done a little exploration of Google's Notebook LM AI for helping you sort and sift through potentially your wargame rules. And one of the interesting features that it has is where it will take your source material and automatically generate a conversation like a podcast. And so the next thing I'm going to show you is going to be this podcast that's based on the Bataille Premier Rules. And it's uncanny how human everything is sounding. The script, everything else, it's all generated by the computer. So if you're prepared to be both fascinated and a little bit frightened, stay tuned. Here we go.
Okay, so tell me if this sounds familiar. You stumble across some old toy soldiers maybe tucked away in the attic, and suddenly you're like, beep, transported back to being a kid again, commanding armies across the living room floor.
Oh, yeah.
But, what if those childhood games, right, what if they had, a direct line to, say, Napoleon's, tactical genius? That's what we're diving into today. Napoleonic Warfare.
Right.
But hold the pastries. Okay, we're talking, the real deal here. Cannons, cavalry charges, and those make-or-break formations that you only thought existed in history books.
Yeah. And what's so captivating, I think, about these historical war games is that they go way beyond simply moving pieces around on a board,
Right.
We're looking at a rule book today called La Bataille Premier M from a group calling themselves Marshall Enterprises. And let me tell you, these folks, they are serious about their history. They've created a game that's incredibly detailed, almost like stepping into the mind of a commander, facing down Napoleon's forces.
So we're not talking Risk here.
No.
This is next level historical simulation, right?
Yeah.
What kind of details are we talking about? I mean, are we measuring out the exact distance a cannonball could travel in centimeters?
Well, they may not be measuring in centimeters.
Okay.
But you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
For starters, they've broken down the battlefield into hexagons.
Okay.
With each hexagon representing 100 meters of terrain.
Wow.
And those little counters you mentioned, the ones representing the troops.
Yeah.
They're not just generic blobs. They've got specific numbers of soldiers.
Right.
Right.
For instance, each infantry counter represents 100 men,
Huh.
while a cavalry counter represents 50.
Makes sense those horses need a bit more elbow room on the battlefield.
Right.
But that level of detail, it makes you wonder, what's the thinking behind it? Is it just about historical accuracy, or is there something more at play here, you think?
I think it's about capturing the constraints that those real commanders face.
Okay.
You see, each turn in the game represents 20 minutes.
Wow.
So you're constantly under pressure to make decisions with, limited time and information, just like Napoleon would have been.
Oh, wow.
And those seemingly small details, the space a cavalry regiment takes up versus an infantry regiment, suddenly become, crucial when you're trying to maneuver your forces effectively.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all about context. You start to appreciate, the immense pressure these commanders were under,
Right.
trying to outmaneuver their opponents with limited communication, limited visibility, and, let's be honest, probably a lot of mud.
Right.
So we've got our map, our, miniature armies all set up. The clock is ticking. What happens next?
Yeah.
Does everyone just, line up and start blasting away at each other?
Not quite.
Okay.
Napoleonic Warfare was all about strategy and tactical formations. This rule book outlines several key formations, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. You've got your classic column formation,
Right.
which is essentially a battering ram of soldiers, great for a powerful advance, but incredibly vulnerable to artillery fire.
Okay, so you better pray the enemy doesn't have any cannons handy if you're going with the battering ram approach. Right.
What other formations were popular back then?
Well, if you're looking for firepower, you can't go wrong with the line formation.
Okay.
Imagine your troops spread out in a long line, maximizing the number of muskets they can fire at the enemy.
Right.
It's a devastating tactic if you can pull it off, but it does have its drawbacks.
I bet. Lines are not exactly known for their agility.
Yeah.
I'm guessing like a speedy cavalry charge could really mess things up, huh?
Exactly. Lines are slow to maneuver and extremely vulnerable to a determined cavalry attack.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of this rule book.
Okay.
It forces you to weigh the pros and cons of each formation, just like a real commander would have done.
So no single best formation then. It's all about adapting to the situation, knowing your enemy, and maybe having a little bit of luck on your side. Absolutely. It's like a giant game of chess, only the stakes are infinitely higher.
Right.
One wrong move. And it's not just a piece on the board that suffers the consequences.
Right.
Speaking of consequences, there's another element that always gets my heart racing when it comes to Napoleonic battles.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say. Cannons.
Yeah.
Tell me those aren't neglected in this rule book.
You know me too well. And trust me, they don't skimp on the artillery details. In fact, the rules surrounding cannons might surprise you with their depth.
So we're not just talking about, like, lining up your miniature cannons and, yelling boom anymore. These rules actually, like, delve into the nitty-gritty of artillery warfare.
Yeah, you got it. They factored in everything,
Yeah.
from short, medium, and long-range fire,
Wow.
each with its own set of probabilities and potential impact. It's not just about brute force either. They even calculate how terrain can affect a cannonball's trajectory.
Really?
Imagine, like, a cannonball bouncing off a hill
Okay.
and wreaking havoc on an unsuspecting enemy unit positioned behind it.
Wow. Talk about adding insult to injury. It makes you realize that, like, a well-placed cannon could really swing the momentum of a battle. It wasn't just about having the biggest guns. It was about, knowing how to use them strategically.
That's exactly right. And it's a point that's often overlooked when we picture, these grand historical battles. Artillery wasn't just about, making a big noise.
Right.
It was a tactical weapon used to weaken enemy formations, disrupt their lines, and, crucially chip away at their morale even before the main clash of infantry.
And speaking of morale, we can't forget about the psychological impact of another key player on the Napoleonic battlefield, the cavalry. These guys were like the lightning strikes of warfare. Fast, terrifying, and capable of, turning the tide in an instant.
Ah, yes, the cavalry. The mere sight of them could send shivers down the spines of even the bravest soldiers. And let me tell you, this rule book captures the heart-stopping thrill and the sheer terror of a cavalry charge brilliantly.
Okay, you've got me on the edge of my seat. How does the rule book, differentiate between different types of cavalry charges? I mean, a charge is a charge, right?
Not so fast. They break down the charges into several categories, each with its own, tactical nuances. You've got your direct charge, the kind that sends a chill down your spine when you see it coming straight at you. Then there's the reaction charge,
Okay.
a more calculated maneuver used to counter an enemy advance. And then my personal favorite, the opportunity charge.
Oh, okay.
It's all about seizing that perfect moment,
Right.
catching your opponent off guard, and exploiting a gap in their lines. It takes precision, timing, and a little bit of luck.
Sounds like something straight out of a history book. But let's be honest, most exhilarating part of any cavalry charge is, the moment of impact, right? When those horses and riders just crash into the enemy lines.
Without a doubt. And the rulebook simulates that impact, especially its effect on morale, in a way that's both clever and insightful.
You keep mentioning morale. What is it about the cavalry that made them such a, psychological weapon?
Just imagine yourself standing in the shoes of a soldier in the Napoleonic era. You see hundreds of horses thundering toward you, the ground shaking beneath your feet, the air thick with the sound of hooves and the shouts of charging men. It would take, nerves of steel to stand your ground.
I can only imagine. I'd probably turn tail and run for the nearest hill.
You're not alone. Even the bravest soldiers could be rattled by a cavalry charge. That's why morale was such a crucial factor in these battles, and that's where those nuanced rules we talked about earlier, they come into play.
So it's not just about the physical casualties inflicted by the charge itself. It's about the psychological blow, the potential to, break an enemy's spirit even if you don't completely overrun their lines.
Precisely. And the rulebook captures this brilliantly. Even if a unit survives a cavalry charge relatively intact, their morale might plummet, making them less effective in combat, more likely to waver, more likely to break and run when the next attack comes.
It's like a domino effect, right?
Right.
One crack in their resolve and the whole thing can just, fall apart.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, how did those commanders even begin to, measure something as intangible as morale? It's not like they could just hand out questionnaires in the middle of the battlefield.
Right. You've hit on a crucial point. It's easy to get, caught up in the tactical side of warfare, the movement of troops, the deployment of artillery. But Napoleonic battles, just like any war in history, they were ultimately clashes of human will. It was the side that could maintain its nerve, its fighting spirit, that often emerged victorious.
Right.
And that's where this rule book, I think, truly shines. It takes those intangible human elements, those moments of courage and fear, and translates them into, a tangible game mechanic.
So how does that actually, work? How do they represent morale in a way that, like, impacts the game itself? Do soldiers have little, thought bubbles above their heads?
No thought bubbles.
Yeah.
But each unit in the game is assigned a morale score.
Okay.
And this score fluctuates throughout the battle based on, like, a whole range of factors.
Yeah, okay.
Did your unit just suffer heavy casualties from, a devastating cannon barrage?
Right.
Morale takes a hit.
All right.
Did you just witness a successful cavalry charge against a neighboring unit?
Yeah.
Morale dips again.
So even witnessing the chaos from afar can impact a unit's morale. It's like a ripple effect of fear, spreading across the battlefield.
Exactly. And don't forget about leadership.
Right.
A strong leader can inspire their troops, rallying them even in the face of setbacks.
Right.
But a weak or indecisive leader,
Yeah.
that can have a devastating impact on morale as well.
It's like having a Napoleon-sized pep talk, right?
Yeah.
Right when your troops need it most, or the opposite. But I'm guessing even the best leaders, they couldn't prevent a rout every time, right? What happens to those fling soldiers in the game? Do they just, disappear off the edge of the map?
Not quite. Remember what I said about attention to detail?
Yeah.
This rule book gets surprisingly specific about how routed units behave.
Right.
Okay? They can't just, rejoin the fight as if nothing happened.
Right.
They're considered disorganized.
Right.
Less effective in combat, and they'll likely try to retreat to safety, maybe regrouping, in a nearby forest or a town if they can.
So there's a chance for, a comeback even after a rout.
There's always a chance.
Wow.
And a clever commander might even be able to exploit a routing enemy, maybe cutting off their escape, or launching a counterattack when they're at their most vulnerable. It's a reminder that even in the chaos of, a full-blown retreat, there's still an element of strategy at play.
This rule book is starting to sound like it could turn a casual board game night into a full-blown historical reenactment. You'd need snacks, strategy maps, maybe even some period costumes to really get into character.
Huh. Maybe hold off on the costumes.
Yeah.
But you're right about the strategic depth. This rule book really forces you to think, several moves ahead, just like Napoleon himself.
Right.
It's not just about brute force. It's about positioning, timing, and exploiting your enemy's weaknesses, both physical and psychological.
So what I'm hearing is this isn't your grandfather's war game.
Right.
It's not just about, rolling dice and moving pieces. It's about experiencing a pivotal moment in history, understanding the challenges those commanders faced, and maybe even learning a thing or two about, human nature along the way.
It really is.
Well, there you have it. A fascinating glimpse into the intricate world of Napoleonic warfare, brought to life through, the surprisingly deep rules of a war game.
It's more than just a game, though, isn't it? It's a journey into the minds of those who waged war on a grand scale.
Exactly. And it reminds us that behind every battle, every maneuver, there were human stories of courage, fear, and the ever-present weight of leadership.
It makes you wonder, what decisions would you make under that kind of pressure?
Would you hold the line? Would you order the charge? Would you be the Napoleon of your own tabletop battlefield? That's something to ponder, isn't it? Until next time, keep exploring history, keep asking those what-if questions, and maybe, just maybe, dust off those old toy soldiers and see what strategic genius lies dormant within you.
So there you have it. Kind of cool, maybe very cool, and a little scary all at the same time. I can't believe that it's able to pull something off that sounds so completely conversational and casual. And sounds like two real people having a conversation. Since I posted the first video on AI, there's been lots of people commenting on their experiences with it and how they've used it. So if you've got some suggestions for other things for me to look at or try, go ahead and make some comments down below. Or if you've had some experience yourself go ahead and post some comments down below, and we can continue our discovery and evaluation of how we can use AI to better play war games. So until our next episode, hopefully I'll be back. They won't replace me that easily. Until then, be well.